Hello, BookTube. Well, as you can see, I once again have a guest. This is my friend Zach from the Brattle Bookshop.
Hi, everybody.
Care to give us a quick, especially since we're talking about bookstores today instead of baseball, care to give us a quick thumbnail of yourself and the Brattle for viewers
Sure.
from 2030?
20.
In case a viewer from 2030, and for you viewers from 2030, I'm sorry for the antiquated reference frame. I should be calling it Trump 5. I know that's how the world thinks of it now, but back now we're still going from Anno Domini. Viewers from then, if they're allowed to look at something about books other than the art of winning, what can you tell us about the Brattle? I think my regular viewers now know that already.
They've probably seen you there. Your spirit is still out in our sale lot, but
Is that the euphemism we're using?
Yeah.
Something still lingers in the sale lot. We'll go with spirit. Sure.
Well, the Brattle Bookshop is a large antiquarian and general used bookstore in downtown Boston. We're one of the few bookshops left that sell both rare and antiquarian books and a good stock of just general used books. We have 3 floors in the building, and we also have an adjacent vacant lot where we have a few dozen book carts and bookshelves built into the walls of the lot, where we have bargain books at $1, $3, and $5. And that's where Steve's essence will always be, one way or another.
That's where I spend most of my time. I always try to do a kind of a Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother goodwill tour of the inside of the shop, just to keep the staff's spirits up. But usually I'm out in the sale lot, yes.
Right, that's right. Although not today, because it's not air conditioned out there.
No, today is iniquitous, just iniquitous.
Yeah.
I remember when I went every day, but that's usually because I was being rousted out to work somewhere else. So I was already having an unpleasant day.
Now, remind me, before you took up a life of leisure as a media mogul, you did work in a bookshop, right?
I did, yes, for a quarter of a century. I did, including for 20 years, right around the corner from the Brattle.
That's right.
When every day on my lunch, every single day.
We had new bookshops in Boston.
Yes, yes.
Those were the days.
And so, in addition to your description of the Brattle, you have been working there since '01, '02.
Oh, well, close. 6.
So a long time.
It's a long time. Plenty of time.
So would it be fair to say, for the purposes of our discussion today, that you have seen it all?
So far, I've seen it all so far.
Because we have a topic today.
Yes, we do.
It deals with bookstores. We can start with the Brattle, but of course it extends out from there.
Yes.
And it affects everyone who's listening. It affects everyone who's ever been to a bookstore, new or used. And that is how to behave.
How to behave. And I'll also add to that, and maybe we'll talk about it too, how to behave if you're just, say, ordering a book from a bookstore that is actually a bookstore and not a warehouse of some sort, which people, even if you're ordering from an online service of some kind, the book will often be coming from an actual bookstore, whether or not you know that that's what's happening.
So can we stipulate, do you think is it pie in the sky, or can we stipulate that bookstore customers are probably among the best customers?
Yes, I think that broadly speaking, I absolutely would argue that.
Now, once upon a time, a bookstore owner of my acquaintance, I think he might have been a bookstore owner of your acquaintance as well, Howard.
Oh, yes. Oh, God. I was just talking about him yesterday with another bookstore owner, the owner of this shop.
He used to tell me, he used to insist when that point would come up. He used to say, well, that's because bookstore customers are all introverts. And he would look at me very pointedly and say, and we know how to behave.
Well, that's a good theory. I take a slightly different perspective. I go out into stores of various types for various reasons in my life as a person. And more often than not, I'm not thrilled to be there. You know, I'm grocery shopping, I'm shopping for a new shirt, which, well, occasionally I'm shopping for a new shirt. But, you know, I'm doing something that's a task. If I'm going to a bookshop, I'm there because I want to be, and I like being there. And I think that's generally the case. So I think
That
that
change things, doesn't it?
it really does.
If you're someplace that you don't want to be, maybe your threshold for how well you watch your own behavior is lower.
Mm-hmm.
But even so, even given that factor, people do misbehave in bookstores.
They certainly do. Not always with malice in their hearts, but sometimes with a little malice in their hearts too.
I think I probably had it much worse in retail.
I think that's probably, although we get the typical retail stuff too. We're an open shop in downtown Boston, so if it happens in a retail place, it'll happen here too occasionally. But you've spent a lot of time in a new bookstore and a lot of time in used bookstores. Do you know if there's a difference, or can you identify a difference?
Yes. Yeah, right away. And it's the difference that you just identified.
Yeah.
No one's ever involuntarily at a used bookstore.
Mm-hmm.
It's still possible to be involuntarily at a retail bookstore.
That's a great.
Still possible to happen. You can be dragged in.
That's a
I
great
guess you see your share of customers who are dragged into used bookstores. But in retail bookstores, it's a lot more possible.
Yeah, that's true. You can have a task to fulfill.
And also with used bookstores, other than except maybe the gigantic production numbers like, you know, Powell's or the Strand, with most used bookstores, it's impossible for you to avoid the awareness that it's individual people who are running the place.
That's right. That's true.
If you drag your brood of inbred, ill-behaved children into a Barnes and Noble that looks just like every other Barnes and Noble you've ever been in, you're going to start to think of, you know, this is just a drive-through theater. I don't need to pay. The people that are here aren't human at all. I don't need to pay any attention to them.
Yeah, I guess that's true. There is a sort of individuality and intimacy to a used bookstore because they're all different one way or another.
Yeah.
So that's, yeah. Oh God.
The Brattle gets
I'm just my empathy, my sympathy is going out to you former Barnes and Noble's employees who are in fact actual humans.
Even I am close to.
Yeah.
And I got horrible stuff, just the worst of stuff. Just the worst of stuff. Not only savagely rude, but also unbelievably clueless. I lost count of how many times I was up. We used to have overstock above the bookshelves on shelves above the bookstop. I lost track of how many times I would be on the top shelf of one of those rolling ladders, working with the stock up on those shelves with literally the bookstore crook of the elbow stack of books right here like this. Someone would walk up to the bottom of the ladder and say, "Do you work here?" You don't get that, I assume?
Well, we get a lot of questions, do you work here? Which is understandable because we're all, you know, sometimes indistinguishable from the customers. We're wearing our normal clothes.
Right, and the Brattle employees don't have badges or tags or anything.
We don't.
So it's just the hollowed out 1,000-mile stare that's going to separate them from you. That's the only way you're going to be.
That takes at least a couple visits to identify.
Yes. Oh my God! I thought for a minute there you're going to say it takes a couple of visits from me to create it.
First, new staff
I do my best.
Develop said stare. Yeah.
And I should say, since our conversational topic is how to behave in a bookstore, I should confess that I do misbehave at the Brattle in one way at least, and have for 55 years, something like that, which is that I will snag an employee and just talk. So they're not working. They're not working while they're talking.
Well, I will, and I won't say that's necessarily rude. I wouldn't categorize it that way. I will say, since we started with this point, it is never rude to ask if someone works at our shop. or any shop like that. It's helpful and not always obvious. So don't, what I always say is there are no bad questions you can ask at a shop, but there are really rude ways of asking questions. So as long as somebody keeps that in mind, they're probably going to be okay.
That used to be the common refrain at the information desk at my old Barnes and Noble, is that we would start to get our lunch rush from noon to 2. And when people started to congregate at the desk, some make-weight manager could be relied upon to say within hearing of the customers, now let's remember, everybody, there's no such thing as a stupid question. And I would always just say, what? What? Try waiting. And the customers cracked up because they don't like that kind of pablum any more than anybody else does. But okay, so when it comes to, let's say, specifically the Brattle Bookshop, are there things that happen repeatedly that are rude?
Yes, and one that's not always obvious, but it comes up especially in the summer, especially in New England, where people love their iced coffee. People will come up to check out at the register and put their sort of condensation producing iced coffee right on the counter. And it's a little rude, but really the problem is that it could be a real problem for the books, because you don't realize you're leaving water on a surface that is repeatedly covered with books. If it's a modern first edition with a dust jacket, that's sort of, they're all now plasticized and in at least temporarily waterproof, I'll say. It's not a huge problem because you put it down, you notice it's a little wet, you wipe it off, no harm done. But there are a lot of books, and probably the majority of the books in a shop like ours, where that's not the case. If you put a book down on top of a little water spot, you could do permanent damage.
And
so
you have customers get hissy when you point that out?
Usually people don't realize what they're doing, and they're apologetic, and we wipe it up and no harm, no foul. Occasionally we'll get somebody goes, like that. And I have to tell, I hate when that happens, but I kind of love it when that happens, because then I feel like the gloves are off and I don't have to respond as diplomatically as I might in other cases.
What about customers who try to dicker? They try to haggle.
Again, my one guiding principle with that is it's not if you do it, it's how you do it. In general, I have no problem with people asking if we can do. Usually the terminology is, can you do a little better on the price? To which I always want to say, well, it'd be better for me if I raised it. But that's obviously not what they mean, and it's certainly not a problem to phrase it that way.
I can't imagine in my wildest dreams saying that at the Brattle, where everything is cheap anyway.
Well,
so you're saying it's not necessarily a deal breaker for someone to ask that?
Absolutely not. I field that question multiple times every day.
And
I, every day I'll say yes to some and no to others. And really what you get at our shop and other used shops and antiquarian shops is there are no fixed costs for books like they are at a new bookshop. In other words, we didn't buy 15 units of this first edition of Old Country for No Men at X price and marked it up at X plus N price. For every book that we have a cost that that varies from how we were able to buy the book. So for instance, if somebody brings up a book from our third floor, and for people who aren't familiar with the shop, the third floor is where we keep the rare books and the higher priced books. So if somebody brings down a book that's priced, say, $500, chances are I might know or have a decent idea of exactly what we paid for that book. and then priced at $500. And there are some times that, we are able to buy it very well, and we might have a little room in that price. And I'd be happy to say, yeah, we can, we could do $450 or something like that, because I know we're still making a profit on it, and everybody's happy. There might be some things where that's not the case, where I know I had to pay a really aggressive price to get the book, and our potential profit or our margin is kind of narrow, and we don't have that room. So it really fluctuates. And I will say, even if we don't have a great margin, if the person is just, for lack of a better way of saying it, nice or respectful in the way they ask, I'm much more inclined to do it. So, I
have no idea there were benefits to being nice.
there really are. They're really, and not even nice, just not obviously an asshole. It should be a reachable bar, I think.
You think? No, it's not.
I'm pretty tolerant because I tend to like people who want to buy good books, and I tend to want to sell good books.
And yet your example was not a good book. Oh, interesting. Oh, very interesting.
See, it's always for Steve's listeners or viewers will know that it's always more exciting to give Steve an example from a book that he doesn't like.
But you bring up you having bought a book and then reselling it.
Yes.
Which touches on an area of the Brattle that I would think would be ground zero for rude behavior. Because right when you walk in the door, you've got that buying table. Yes. People bring in books. That's the point where I would imagine most people are at their most defensive, their touchiest.
Yes.
They're handing you these books, and they have an idea of what they expect from you. And if they don't get it, surely that brings out the worst in people?
Yeah, it certainly can. Although I will say not everyone has, the type of unrealistic expectations that can lead to that kind of defensive or aggrieved reaction to what our offer is. But I'm somewhat sympathetic to that reaction on the part of the people who are selling us books, because they're at least touching on a real factor, and that's there's a real inequality of sort of knowledge and information with most of the people that we buy from. In other words, most people who sell us books, and most people in general, don't have much of an idea or much familiarity with the rare and used book market. Whereas that's what I do. That's what we do here. So usually people are coming in with a real disadvantage in terms of, just information that they have about what they're selling. Or I should be more precise, good information about.
I was just going to amend that myself. You get plenty of people who come in who think they are not only the expert on their own books, but on all books.
Yes. And I'm going to sound, like Grandpa Simpson again here, but it's that damn internet. Because it's a wonderful, wonderful tool for finding information. It's not a terribly good tool for recognizing what the good and usable information is from the information that you find. Very often people will bring in books that they've, quote, looked up and, tried to match in their way with other similar books that are being offered for sale online. Sometimes it's not the same book at all that they're comparing it to, which again isn't a comment on somebody's intellect or capabilities. It's usually more just a familiarity with what distinguishes in edition of a title from another edition, and which is the valuable one.
And there at the buying table, you and Nicole have, I would think, two really strong advantages in a situation like that. The first being that you know what you're talking about.
Yes.
Being that you aren't at any risk of the customer going over your head and getting a different answer.
Well, that's right. Although the customer always can get another opinion from another seller. But,
Right, from another seller. But at Barnes and Noble, that was always our stalking worry, is
Yeah.
that some customer would ask something utterly unreasonable. We would say no, and they would say, I want to talk to someone else. I want to talk to your superior. And
Yeah.
half the time, the superior, who hadn't been on the sales floor in a year, widely contradict you.
Right. Occasionally I or Nicole will get that, can we talk to Ken, or Ken Gloss is the owner of the shop, or can we talk to the owner? Although I will say, it happens much more, unfortunately, to Nicole, because
I have seen that firsthand.
Because of just misogyny.
Yeah.
To put it plainly. I tend to get the benefit.
She gets more of that crap than you do.
More often, just because I'm a man. So that is certainly is still prevalent in our business, as it is everywhere else. But no, if somebody tries to go over my head or hers, Ken, the owner, or Joyce, the co-owners of the shop, will certainly come down and talk to the person, but they're not going to get a different answer. And in fact, they're likely to get an answer that they find much less palatable.
Yes. Yes, I've seen that many times. In that circumstance, as in so many other circumstances, they'll be lucky if they get Ken. Not a wise strategy, but you're saying it doesn't happen that often.
It doesn't happen that often, because I think one thing that we're good at is, we have to, one of the big challenges in buying books is to bridge that sort of information gap with the person who's selling. And the best way, I think, to do that is be transparent about, identifying what they have, giving them an idea of the market for it, and giving them an idea of why I'm making the offer that I am. It's not somebody comes in and puts something on the table and I say, look at it and say, all right, I'll give you $20. I could do it that way. And sometimes, for brevity, people want that. I tend to be a little more long-winded in my explanations, because I really am conscious of, like I said, bridging that informational gap. I want, I really want that person to feel like they're being treated fairly. And I want to try and, let them feel like they're not being taken advantage of, because it really is easy for somebody in my situation to take advantage of someone when buying their material. It'd be unethical, and it'd be kind of, well, it'd be a dick move, but people do it all the time because they can, and it's easy.
It wouldn't be overreaching to say that in the course of any given week, you do a fair amount of teaching.
I guess that's, yeah, I guess I didn't really think of it that way, but yeah, a lot of the process of buying is sort of teaching someone about what they have.
But it does come down partially to ethics.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. If you made a $500 offer on a book that was a $1,500 book, they might never know. They might think they were royally well treated.
Well, I'll also say that if I made a $500 offer to buy a book that I am going to sell for $1,500 eventually, that might be a fair offer, depending on the book.
Huh. Mm.
Because if it's a book that, or let me put it this way, in some cases that could be a very competitive and fair offer. In some cases it could be, lowballing somebody. But it really does depend. And I could go into a little more about what I mean by that if you want.
Well, the phenomenon that I like about the buying table in a circumstance like that is that it's always instantly cooperative. I have never once seen a Brattle employee get a valuable book or something that they even wonder is valuable at the buying table and not instantly get on the phone to a whole bunch of other people at the shop.
Right. Or at
cooperative. Least, no one's taking a flyer.
That's right. Well, just today, about an hour ago, Steve and I were supposed to have this talk at about 10:30, and at 10:15, a gentleman came in with some books to sell, and I had to work on those. And one of them was a 1687 edition of Chaucer, which it's not really early for Chaucer, but it's the 8th collected edition of Chaucer. So it's a collected book and an important book. And off the top of my head, I couldn't give him, not only couldn't I, make a credible offer on it just because I didn't have that kind of familiarity off the top of my head, which isn't unusual. There are lots of books out there. But also to determine its value, I had to collate it, meaning I had to leaf through every leaf of the book to make sure that it was complete, which means that I had to bring it down to our basement where I have, you can see behind me some of our reference shelves, and I had to find a record for that book in one of our references and find out exactly what the content should be and collate it against that. So it takes some time to do these things. So it's always collaborative, whether it's, me with, with references or me with a colleague. It takes time to do these things right.
And the menu of reasons why someone would give up a book like that is the whole of human existence. It could be anything.
The whole, that's right. In this case, it was part of the estate of a relative, which is often the case. Sometimes it's collectors who are just moving in a different way with their collection, and they want space for other things. Sometimes it's someone who has something that wasn't terribly valuable when they bought it, and now it's a lot more valuable. It can be lots of different reasons.
So it would be probably too cut and dry, too prescriptive to say that the Brattle has any rules when it comes to customer behavior. The only one that's coming to my mind is that you always caution people that they can't take pictures in the shop if someone else is in the picture.
Yeah, that's right. You're welcome to take pictures of the books, of anything like that, but if you're taking a picture of another person, you got to have their permission. That's one. And I will say that's something that people are, I don't know if I've ever had an issue with someone either doing that or having a problem with that. One thing that can happen sometimes is people decide during a very busy, let's say Saturday retail day, that they want to stage a very elaborate photo for their Instagram feed or something else that turns out to be quite disruptive to the order of business. And there we do have to intervene. So I will say, try to understand that it's a really fun place to be. I love being in the shop. I know people are genuinely enjoy being here, but it is a place of business, and needs to be if it's to exist. So try to keep that. And what I hope people will keep in the back of their minds when they come into the shop is, well, like you said at first, regular human people work here. And try.
Stretch. You got a couple of people on staff that is a bit of a stretch. We'll overlook that in diplomatic silence.
Yeah. Try not to do anything that's going to greatly inconvenience either the staff or the other other shoppers. So again, elaborate photos. If no one else is in the shop, go for it. But if it's busy, maybe wait. Try not to do anything to damage the books. That's something that you think would be taken for granted, and the vast majority of people do that instinctively. But there are,
well, to the extent that they know.
Yes, well,
the vast majority of people, when they want to pull a book off a tightly packed shelf, grab it by the top of the text block and pull like that.
Yes,
which is the ultimate nightmare of a used bookstore. That's the first way to rip it.
Yep. My favorite customers who come up to our third floor, again, where we have the rare books, are the people who walk in, look around, and then the first thing they do is ask, can I touch anything? I know that person is not going to be a problem, and it's very easy to say, yes, you can touch anything you want. Just be careful. If there's something you're not sure how to handle, please ask. I can definitely say I and the other people who work here, we love talking to people who want to learn about how to handle books or how to handle this material. I am weird in that way. I like nothing more than to talk, to somebody about how to handle a spine correctly and, how to reshelve something safely. Those are really important things. And a good guideline is, if you're not sure, ask. But yeah, a lot of people don't instinctively know how to handle books, period, or fragile or rare books specifically. So don't assume that you do, I guess, and ask, because we're happy to help.
Does it ever occur that you have a customer sort of bothering other customers? Aside from me, so aside from, if that's what you're laughing about, I try to maintain.
Yeah.
I try to bedevil only the staff and the other regulars. I try not to involve innocent civilians. Although, oh my God, when I'm at the pricing table and somebody comes up and says, "Can I get a recommendation?" It's all I can do not to speak. I have to grab the table not to speak.
No, sometimes that does happen. Sometimes we have people who are, overly enthusiastic about being there and sharing their love of certain books or books in general, and they just have to, engage everyone around them in that, and that can be somewhat disruptive. One thing we definitely talk to new staff about are to be a little hesitant about engaging customers in conversation until you know who the person is. Because just like any other open shop, especially in a sort of downtown city, you get all kinds of people who are going to come in, and you don't want to engage all of them. Not, it's unusual that we have somebody who's a problem to the extent that we need them to leave, but it can happen.
And it can be innocent too, right? Plenty of people go to used bookstores intent on not speaking to anyone.
Yes.
Don't want anyone, staff or other customers, walking up to them and saying, "Hi, how are you?"
Yeah. Hi. Yeah. That kind of thing is nice. It's nice to say hi. I tend to say hi to people as they walk in the door.
Oh yeah. You and Nicole say hi. Let me know if you need any help. But
yeah.
But after that, you're not.
After that, we tend to disengage until the customer comes back to us. I think that's just, that's how I like to be treated. So I tend to, expect that. And, I think we do a pretty good job of letting people know that we're here if they need them. But if you don't, some people like to come in and that's their private time.
Yes.
A couple times I've had to explain to customers who were trying to chat someone up who clearly wasn't, who wasn't up for it. For whatever reason, you just sort of try to gently intervene and say, "Hey, try to play buffer."
That was generally the atmosphere at my bookstore, except for me. except for me.
Yeah, right.
I would go up to customers that I'd never seen before in a million years and say, "What's that? What are those books in your hand? I don't know if that blouse quite works.
Yeah.
I think somebody needs a haircut."
Yeah.
There's not much anybody could do about it. It was just sort of the risk you ran.
No,
I don't do that at the shop. I don't do that at the Brattle.
Well, I mean, if we had like a Tickle Me Elmo version of me, one of my 12 lines would be, "It's okay, that's Steve."
I should point out that several times over the decades, I have not been able to resist when someone says I'm looking for a recommendation. I practically put my hand up like this. I've had many Brattle staff members just roll their eyes and say, "Go ahead and take it."
Which, by the way, is fine. I'll say there's another a fellow bookseller who works at a nearby shop who comes in almost every day, and very often someone will have a question about particularly some kind of genre fiction that I don't have a terribly good feel for. And I'll just sort of look at him and say, "Do you want to take this one?" Bookselling, I think, at its best is a very collaborative endeavor in lots of different ways, and a very interactive
Between losers
endeavor.
and non-losers.
Say that again?
Losers and non-losers.
Oh yeah, between the customers and the staff.
So your parting message to people who are coming to the Brattle, I assume part one would be definitely make your way there.
Yeah, please do.
But and part two for our subject today would be just ordinary courtesy. Just
ordinary courtesy that's it. That's it. I wish we didn't have to go into things more specifically than that, but you know, that's the way of the world. But yeah, ordinary courtesy will get you as far as you ever need to go at the shop.
Ordinary courtesy. Don't damage the books. Don't
do anything dangerous. Don't be rude.
Don't do anything dangerous. Don't be rude. Don't incite an armed insurrection to overthrow a settled democracy. Don't do any of those things. You'll be fine.
Yeah. There's not really enough room to gather in the shop, so there probably aren't going to be too many.
And also, I might point out, it's not a democracy.
It's definitely not a democracy.
So you're in the clear when it comes to that. Well,
the customer will always have an opportunity to be right, but they will not always be right.
All right. Well, Zach's going back to the front lines.
I'm going back to work.
Hopefully for courteous behavior. But we will meet again next week. If Zach is free, we have a corker of a subject.
I'm looking forward to it.
We'll see you all then.
Bye, Steve.